So we have some important news on the current efforts to remove suppressors and SBRs from the NFA nationwide. As many of you know, the Hearing Protection Act and the Short Act passed in H.R. 1, the Big Beautiful Bill. However, it was only the $0 tax version. However, now in response to that, multiple lawsuits have been launched to remove the NFA's unconstitutional registry and all those other restrictions. So let's talk about what is happening. Now, real quick, if you're watching this channel, then obviously it's safe to say that you care about the Second Amendment and your rights. Now, here's the thing, even law-abiding gun owners are ending up in jail because they make a bunch of critical mistakes. And those are mistakes that you don't even realize that you're making or that you don't understand that they're illegal. So I put together a free resource called the Legal Survival Guide. It's aimed to help you guys avoid all of those traps that maybe you could fall in. It takes about 2 minutes to read. It's just a simple PDF, and it really could save you years behind bars. I made it to help you guys, again, completely free to download using the link down below. It's just something that I wanted to provide you guys for free so that you can have it in your phone or maybe print it out. And there's a little card also in there that you can put in your wallet to give you additional resources to help you in situations. Obviously, not meant to be legal advice. I'm not your attorney. This isn't an attorney-client relationship, but I wanted to provide you guys some free resources to prevent you falling in some bad situations. Again, if you're interested, click the links down below. It's completely free to do. All you have to do is enter your email to get that free PDF. So as I mentioned in the intro, we need to talk about what is currently happening right now in response to the Hearing Protection Act and the Short Act, which passed in H.R. 1, the Big Beautiful Bill. Now, if you've been following along with the channel all along, we've been talking about what's been going on. And recently we got news that H.R. 1 passed. It passed last week. In the versions of the HPA and the Short Act that were included in that bill were the simple reductions of the tax. So under the new law, the NFA tax was reduced from $200, per registry of those items, from $200, and now it's going to be $0. Now, in my eyes, this was a half measure, and I, of course, wanted the full repeal of all of those NFA restrictions. But unfortunately, rhinos in Congress were unwilling to press that issue to get the full version of the Short Act and the HPA included in the Big Beautiful Bill. And also, they did not want to remove the parliamentarian when it was in the Senate. So the version that we got did not strike the full language of the NFA, did not strike out SBRs and suppressors fully. Instead, it was only a reduction of the tax. However, this fight is far from over. In response to the $0 tax language that just passed, a lawsuit has now already been filed to remove the rest of the NFA's unconstitutional restrictions on SBRs, SBSs, and suppressors. GOA, FRAC, Palmetto State Armory, Silencer Co. have now joined together to file a lawsuit against the ATF. There's also another lawsuit I know is coming, which is going to be FPC, NRA, SAF, and I believe ASA, which they are going to also be filing against the ATF to remove all of those remaining elements of the NFA. Now, in this lawsuit filed by GOA and the other groups, they argue that enacted in 1934, the National Firearms Act is premised on Congress's taxing powers. The act imposed a $200 tax on the manufacture and transfer of particular classes of firearms. The NFA's authors left no doubt that the NFA was an exercise of the taxing power and that the Supreme Court upheld it on that basis. This has been the uncontroversial understanding of the courts and commenters for nearly a century. But the NFA no longer imposes any tax on the vast majority of firearms it purports to regulate. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which Congress and the President enacted on July 4th, 2025, zeroes the manufacture and transfer tax on nearly all NFA-regulated firearms. That means that the constitutional foundation on which the NFA rested was dissolved, and the NFA cannot be upheld under any other Article 1 power. With respect to the untaxed firearms, the act is now unconstitutional. GOA goes on to argue that the One Big Beautiful Bill Act left undisturbed the NFA's registration requirements and restrictions on manufacture and transfer, which for most NFA firearms now lacks any accompanying exercise of Congress's taxing powers. Plaintiffs are individuals and organizations who are burdened by the NFA's regulatory requirements pertaining to the untaxed firearms. Plaintiffs seek an order declaring that the NFA is unconstitutional with respect to the untaxed firearms it purports to regulate and enjoining enforcement of the unconstitutional provisions. The first count, which they brought against the ATF and the language here in this complaint, is for declaratory judgment that the NFA's registration and transfer requirements exceed Congress's Article 1 enumerated powers with respect to the untaxed firearms. GOA states in the complaint that the NFA's registration, manufacture, and transfer requirements pertaining to untaxed firearms exceeds Congress's enumerated powers. These requirements were enacted and sustained as an exercise of Congress's taxing powers. Silencers, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and the NFA's any other weapon category are now untaxed, yet the registration and transfer requirements persist. Now, in the second count that they brought in this complaint, they asked for injunctive relief against the federal officials and all of the officers and agents of the ATF from implementing or enforcing this NFA restriction with respect to all these now untaxed firearms, which include SBRs, SBSs, and suppressors. So in summary, what GOA and the other plaintiffs asked for in this specific challenge here against the ATF is for the court here to declare that the NFA's registration and transfer requirements pertaining to the now untaxed firearms, which are SBRs, SBSs, suppressors, and AOWs, that exceeds Congress's enumerated powers. They also asked for the court to enjoin all the ATF's employees, officers, agents, and everyone from implementing or enforcing the NFA against those now untaxed firearms. So that is what this new lawsuit aims to do in response to the NFA tax change that just passed in the Big Beautiful Bill. This lawsuit was filed in the Northern District of Texas, which is a federal court. And when it comes to the 2A cause, that has been a pretty good area to file these lawsuits. We've got a lot of good decisions that come out of the Northern District of Texas. We've had decisions like the Vanderstock 80%er case against the ATF, the mock pistol brace lawsuit against the ATF, and a lot of others that we've got wins in that jurisdiction. The hope would be that maybe we get a great judge like Judge Reed O'Connor, who really understands the type of ATF/ firearms challenges, and he's been pretty good when it comes to decisions, and we've got a lot of wins out of his court. However, I will note that in my opinion, regardless of what happens, there will no doubt be an appeal in this case. It will get elevated to the Fifth Circuit, and the possibility of a nationwide injunction is kind of now off the table, especially because of the Supreme Court's recent 6-3 ruling that they issued just last month. That means that any relief would likely need to be limited to the members of these organizations or the companies and their customers. And really, if this gets elevated to the Fifth Circuit, I see that they would probably issue a stay on the decision when reviewing this because they don't want to disrupt how the NFA is currently operating until this gets to a higher level, potentially the Supreme Court. The NFA also at large being struck down is a different relief mechanism that could impact this case, and that would benefit everybody. But I also suspect with a decision like that, the Fifth Circuit would stay any win that we got, striking down the NFA at large when it applies to SBRs, SBSs, and suppressors, again, because they do not want to disrupt the status quo. Now, that's just my opinion based on what we've seen happen before in these lower courts and, when they get appealed. That's not to say that's absolutely what's going to happen, but based on what the Supreme Court recently said in some of these prior cases, how they developed, out of the Northern District of Texas and how they got elevated to Fifth Circuit, that's what I see potentially would happen. Now, one caveat to all of this, which I'm saying is we don't really know how the Trump ATF will actually respond to this challenge. Based on how they responded to some other 2A cases, that could be maybe a win that we could get early in this case based on how the ATF responds. We've seen them change position in a lot of 2A cases recently, so maybe that could lead to a faster win in this type of challenge. I don't think it's unlikely that the Trump ATF may respond by agreeing that the $0 tax now essentially undermines the statutory structure of the NFA and that the agency's ability to enforce the NFA against these untaxed suppressors and SBRs really now is an issue, and that they don't actually have that enforcement mechanism under the statutory language. Again, that would be conceding a lot, but we've seen the Trump administration take some interesting stances right now when it comes to the 2A cause. So what we're currently going to be watching for in this challenge is first what judge actually gets assigned to this case, and then we're going to be seeing how the Trump ATF responds to this challenge. So that's what's currently going on in response to the Hearing Protection Act and the Short Act, how they've passed with the $0 tax. Now that they've passed in Congress, lawsuits have been launched to eliminate the registration and the registry and all the other components. And so now we're going to see how this plays out in the courtroom. But good on GOA and the other organizations that are filing lawsuits to get rid of the remaining elements of the NFA and all those other unconstitutional restrictions that are currently still in place that Congress did not get rid of. So as this develops, as we get more information, I will let you guys know. As always, if you want to support the channel, make sure you subscribe to the channel. That, of course, helps the channel to grow. And then also you can check out my website, armscholar.com. That has the free legal guide that you can sign up for. We have channel merch that you can get. And then also I curate deals over there that you guys can check out if you want. It helps you save some money. And just things also I think that there's value in if you want to check that out. But as always, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget, this nation was built by Armed Scholars, and this nation will be maintained by Armed Scholars.